Welcome, everybody, to the Jim Master Show Live Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show Series. How is everybody doing today? It's good to see all those smiley faces. Hope you're having a good day. If you're not, this is the place to come for some inspiration, amazing conversations, terrific guests from Broadway, Hollywood, television, film, music, inspiration, sports, comedy, culinary arts, you name it, literally from all around the world, too. This is our Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series. We started over 410 plus shows ago. It's truly amazing. And it's been fantastic. Welcome, everybody. We hope you're having a good day. And again, this is the place where you will be lifted up and you'll be inspired. You'll always learn something. And usually we end up tossing in sometimes planned and oftentimes unplanned levity when things happen. Of course, our famous levity, too. I was saying in the summertime show is a lot of light, love, and levity. And I said love and levity too fast. And what happened? The word levity was born, and everybody has fell in love with that word. And we thank you very much for making us part of your day. Thanks to everybody who's been subscribing to our YouTube channel as well. We would love if you do that. If you haven't, that is really, really, really special. And YouTube loves when you do it. So do we. There it is on the bottom of the screen. It's the channel you're watching right now. It is Jim Masters TV. That's right, Jim Masters TV. Subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell so you never miss any of our amazing episodes. We've been basically doing this show live 7 days a week. Live 7 days a week. And sometimes we do a couple of shows on the weekend, like 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday type thing. If we have a guest that's international and we want to make sure we can sort of, meet their time periods so it's not too late for them. So if you're joining us live, we welcome you. If you're watching this later on in the archives, we welcome you as well. Feel free, and we would love it if you click thumbs up on this episode on our YouTube channel. That would be fantastic. And also drop a comment on the episode as well on the YouTube channel. I know you guys love to comment live during the show, and we love that. We're going to show some of those sprinkled during the broadcast. We welcome all the lovities, all the troupities, and everybody that's a part of JMS Live. And make sure that you also comment on the YouTube channel as well. We would love that. How's everybody doing today? Hope you guys are doing well. We're going to be scheduling another pop-up show, host chat, viewer chat pop-up show soon. So stay tuned for that. When you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll never miss any of our pop-up shows. We're also going to be doing some on-location segments now that summer is right around the corner too. Some on-location episodes and features. So we got a lot of stuff planned for all of you who like to check us out. A lot of our guests also tell me they come on the show as a guest. We become friends if we weren't friends already. And then they love to watch all these episodes too, binge watching in the archives, which I think is really, really cool. Today, we welcome noted New York Times bestselling author David Fisher to our show today. And he is absolutely amazing. He's met so many people. We were talking about, we know a lot of similar people in television and radio and film and music and everywhere else. And I think it's really amazing. It is such a small world when you have an opportunity to connect with folks who end up knowing a lot of the same people, or they've worked with a lot of the same people. This fine gentleman has had an opportunity to collaborate with Ed McMahon, George Burns, Terry Bradshaw, and on and on and on. We're going to talk about that in just a second, because he is not a New York Times bestselling author once, twice, or thrice. Multiple times. And his material has been on the shelves. He's got new material out as well. And of course, you can get all of it online. Good to see everybody. We welcome you, and just seeing a lot of comments coming in here. Thanks so much for all the great comments as we welcome our very special guest live from New York City, ever the New Yorker, David Fisher, joining us here on the show. Just want to tell you a little bit about him. We always in the beginning like to sprinkle a little background in for you before we welcome the guest on, because sometimes you may know the work but not know the person, and you end up knowing the person oftentimes after watching our series for more than 30 years, David Fisher has been writing about an extraordinary variety of subjects, ranging from Major League Baseball umpires to Nobel Prize winning biochemists. He's the author of more than 80 books, among them 24 New York Times bestsellers, and he's been a frequent contributor to major magazines and newspapers. He's the only writer to ever have a work of nonfiction, a novel, and a reference book offered simultaneously by the Book of the Month Club. Really amazing. We're going to talk about how he began his career. He began it as a staff writer for Joan Rivers' syndicated talk show. That's right, That Show. You may remember that. From there, he joined Life magazine when it was still published weekly and became the youngest reporter in that magazine's history, covering primarily sports and youth culture. We're going to take it from there as we welcome him live from New York to the Jim Masters Show Live. David, thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today, sir. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. But I look behind you and I see those Emmys there, and, I don't have any of those.
But 24 New York Times bestsellers, I mean, that's not easy. That doesn't just happen unless you're doing the right thing. So, I mean, the professional career started on Joan Rivers' syndicated talk show. Huh? Tell us a little bit about that. That's exciting.
Well, I was a page at NBC. I had, at that point, graduated from college and was waiting to go into the Army. And she hired me from the page staff, and first as paying me $7 a joke. That show, each show had a theme.
That's right.
You would write 25 jokes about each theme. And, for example, we did a show once about pasta, and she said that that's how she met her husband at that time, Edgar. And the question was how, and she said, well, Edgar had a date with someone else on my block, but he went past her house.
Yeah,
I didn't say the jokes were necessarily good,
but they
was young, but there was that's $7 right there.
Take my wife, please.
Yeah.
Well, did you have a penchant for comedy early? And if so, who were some of the ones that you admired? I mean, were you following the Gleasons, the Red Skeltons, the Dangerfields, others along the way that you admired as well? Phyllis Dillers?
I certainly love them all. But the truth was, I always wanted to be a journalist.
Yeah.
And I learned early that Art Buchwald, Russell Baker,
yes,
and going back much further, Don Marquis, they could use humor to make a point.
Yeah.
And they could make you laugh.
Yeah.
You think. And growing up, my dream was to have a syndicated humor column. I have been extremely fortunate in that I worked with some of our great comedians. Leslie Nielsen and I did a parody of a movie star autobiography, as the dedication was to the movie industry, the only business in the world in which the trailer came first.
There it is on the screen.
There's Leslie, one of the great people.
What was it like working with him on this? The Naked Truth.
I loved it.
Yeah.
George Burns and I did several books together. And
that's true. Yeah. And that was kind of a cool experience too. What was it like working with George?
Well,
amazing, huh?
There I was sitting in his living room and thinking, this is very cool. I'm sitting in George Burns' living room, and we would talk. I remember once I said to him, George, because he was always known with all the young all the girls. I said, George, what's the story with you and all these young girls?
Yeah.
And he said, listen, kid, I'm 93 years old. I'm lucky I can pee on my shoe. And you know, and he was, you know, the first book we did together was called Gracie, a Love Story, which
Yes,
was actually one of the most successful books of the decade.
I
And
know.
you know, and at one point we were talking about it, and I asked him if Gracie, if he about the about the relationship,
Yeah.
and he said, I know what Gracie did for me. And then he
Yes.
paused and he said, but Gracie knew what I did for her too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and he
That
was
was a
a sweet,
yeah.
decent, good guy. And um,
That was an amazing for you to be, pinchable moment there to be saying, I'm sitting here in the living room with George Burns. That must have been incredible because I know what that feeling, is like almost on a nightly basis because George Burns sits in my living room with
uh,
me.
well, if you look over my shoulder right there,
Yeah.
you'll see William Shatner hanging there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And George agrees with everything you said, and he confirms everything you said, and he sends you his best with his cigar and all.
He was, he was terrific. He was
What
just terrific.
wasn't he? You mentioned another. I was mentioning that one of my colleagues for years is Doug Llewellyn, who hosts the People's Court show, and we actually do a television news magazine show out of New York that we've done for a long time that we both co-anchor, co-host TV and radio shows for. And he's worked with Shatner as well. And what was it like working on? There's a couple books you did with Shatner, right?
We did 3 books together.
Here's one of them, Live
That was
Long and What
the
I Learned Along the Way. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the third one. The first one was his autobiography, and then we did a book about Leonard Nimoy, his relationship with Leonard Nimoy. And
Yeah.
you know, I've always felt that Shatner, now having seen pretty much everything he's ever done, has never received there it is, there's Leonard, has never received the credit for being the kind of actor, the talented actor he is, because I think people looked at Star Trek and Captain Kirk as this
Yeah.
kind of stilted character,
Yes.
and they thought that was the extent of his talent.
Or the
Not,
Twilight Zone episode
yeah,
with the
not a
monster on the
choice.
wing, right?
Well, you look at his early movies, you
Yeah.
know, and he was trained by Tyrone Guthrie at the Stratford Shakespeare Theater and
That's right.
did Shakespeare, and then he did his work on I feel his work on Boston Legal.
Was fantastic.
Brilliant,
The way
brilliant.
he delivered a line so quick and it was just really yeah, that I wish that had lasted longer. It was really well written, well acted. um
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and Shatner now he's 89, almost 90, and
Yes.
he still lifts weights every day.
Yes.
People don't know he's raised tens of millions of dollars for charity with the Hollywood Horse Show. He
Yes.
rides every day. Every day, he's an extraordinarily unusual and wonderful person.
Do you get a chance to stay in touch with him?
On occasion,
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to him in a while. I called him for his birthday, but
Yeah.
that was that was it. You know, just
How does it work when somebody like a Shatner or Leslie Nielsen or even a Terry Bradshaw, wants to do a book? What is that process like? How do you end up coming into the equation?
there's a lot of different ways. Sometimes I initiate it. I had a friend whose father was George Burns' manager, and I asked her to introduce me to him, and his name was Irving Fine, a legendary manager, and I met him, and I said, Irving, I want to do a book with George Burns, and he said, George is too old. He can't do a book. And I said, George doesn't have to do anything. He just has to sit and talk with me. And he said, well, what would the book be about? And I said, I'll tell you the first line. And the first line is, for 40 years, my act had only one joke, and then she died. And Irving looked at me and said, let's do it.
Yeah,
And we did it. So that started. Same thing with Leslie Nielsen. I had an idea that Leslie had done parodies of everything else. He should do a parody of a movie star autobiography. So I reached out to a friend of mine who was a casting director, and literally an hour, literally from the moment that I spoke, that I came up with the idea, I was on the phone with Leslie Nielsen saying, let's do it. So, and then I get calls from agents all the time. I can be reasonably sure that if there's an event in the news, I'm going to get a call from someone who is a participant asking me if I'd be interested in getting involved.
You, somebody that I've always admired too. I mean, all of these folks you've had an opportunity to work with, and I've admired. These are veterans of, you know, Hollywood and television and sports and film and all of it. The one and only Ed McMahon. I know a couple of things with Ed, but what was it like working with Ed McMahon on this book and others?
Ed was one of the sweetest human beings you will ever meet.
Yeah.
And he knew how fortunate he was, and he gave back all the time. He was a principal in an organization called Horatio Alger, which helps underprivileged people. You couldn't walk through a room with Ed without him handing out $20 bills to the people, you know, the porters and the doormen and things like that, which hurt him in the long run. And you know, even though he was not treated very well by the people who owned the Tonight Show rights after Johnny Carson died, he would never, ever say a negative word about anyone.
Is that owned by the family, the Carson estate? Do they own it?
They're still deeply involved in it.
Yeah.
Whether they own it outright or they own it with someone else and simply manage it, I don't know. But they could have done more for Ed than they did.
Ed was instrumental on that show. Absolutely. It
was disappointing. You know, with Ed, you'd have to, he just wanted, I've been fortunate with Ed. I worked with a baseball umpire named Ron Luciano.
Oh, sure. Of course.
And Ronnie and Ed and Terry Bradshaw, very much the same way. They just want to make people happy. Leslie Nielsen, they love the sound of laughter. They you know, and they will do whatever is necessary to make people happy.
One of our viewers asked, what was it like with Terry, great football player, of course, and television sports commentator as well now. What was it like working with Terry? He's a character. He's really full of life and enthusiasm and passion, and you know, he's like football's Regis Philbin.
Well, you know, I have been privileged in a lot of ways. The FBI gave me access to its crime lab, and I spent 6 months in the FBI crime lab. I've watched my car being built from the ground up, but I've had a catch with Terry Bradshaw.
Yeah.
You know, I've thrown a football with Terry.
You've thrown a football with him, yeah.
You know, and as we're doing it, throwing back and forth, I'm thinking, I'm never going to be a pro football player, but this is very cool.
But
and Terry's another one. It's just you just want good things to happen for him.
Yeah.
And he makes them happen because his whole objective from the time he gets up in the morning is to make people laugh and smile. And, you know, and when he's having a down moment, he goes off by himself. He doesn't want to inflict it on anybody else. We're actually starting to do another book together.
Are you really?
Starting next month. You know, it was interesting. And the subject of this book is that when Terry Bradshaw spent his life being Terry Bradshaw, the great football player. And like so many athletes, when it ended, he had to start and think, who am I? What is I'm 30 whatever it is years old. What's the rest of my life like? And in fact, he discovered Terry Bradshaw, who he really, and it took him a while. There were some false starts. There were some real
The
problems.
personality, and yeah.
And Terry is very outgoing about admitting his problems, the problems that he had, because he feels it will help other people, what he's gone through.
He's made a wonderful transition as a broadcaster too. Created a whole, or not created, but enhanced the persona that's already there, which I think is fantastic. He has a good time. He has a good time, and you can see it.
And conversely, I worked, Johnny Cochran and I became really good friends.
Yes.
And Johnny was another one.
Right.
People don't know Johnny Cochran was the number 3 ranking person in the Los Angeles Police Department. He was the one who outlawed chokeholds, but Johnny's son is a cop. Johnny's son is a California highway patrolman. And, to be able to sit with Johnny Cochran and talk about race relations and talk about the Simpson trial and all of those things, what a gift. What an incredible gift.
What did you learn from the conversation? What would be a takeaway for you from chatting with somebody like a Johnny Cochran that still sticks with you today, David?
Well, there were with Johnny, there were 2 things. He was a champion of allowing F. Lee Bailey, who was late in his career and who died recently.
Right.
And he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But he had been a great lawyer at one point. And Johnny, for whatever reasons, allowed him to be part of the defense team.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny told me once that he never took a case unless he felt he was going to learn something. And he did not want to take the Simpson case. And he was pressured into taking it by the African American community in Los Angeles. And he couldn't figure out what he was doing there. And what they did once, he wanted to give F. Lee Bailey a moment in the sun, and he let him interview Mark Furman, who was a cop. And they didn't think that Mark Furman was going to make much of an impact. And F. Lee Bailey got Mark Furman to admit he had made a series of tapes about being a cop. And Judge Ito did not allow the tapes to be played in the courtroom, but Johnny flew back to North Carolina and listened to the tapes.
Mm.
And he told me once, he said, as I listened to those tapes, I understood why God had put me on this case, because it verified all of the brutality, all of the things that they had done. And he told me, and this is a quote, he said, if those tapes ever went public, Mark Furman would have to crawl back into the hole he came out of and never come out again.
Right.
He told me that Mark Furman used to wear, I have no idea if this is true, I'm telling you this is what Johnny told me, that Mark Furman used to wear a swastika under his collar. And when he was working as a detective. And we talked about the trial.
Yeah.
I from everybody I worked with, I wrote the first book about a mafia killer,
I know that.
Joey the Hitman.
Yeah.
And we were out to dinner once with his birthday with a group of friends in Los Angeles at the Rainbow Grill. And somebody, they all knew who he was. And somebody said to him, Joey, what would you do if I told you I didn't believe you are who you say you are? And Joey picked up a fork and he shoved it under his throat like this and said, I'd ask you to say it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That has staying power. What was that like? Was there any hesitation or on your part, any pause, any thought, or you just knew it was going to be an amazing and fascinating story, and you wanted to help him get that out to the public?
Well, I was young. I had my first agent.
You were eager and hungry and raring
And
to go.
we were walking through Central Park one day, and he told me that he had this client, and some of the people he had approached, some of his other clients, didn't want anything to do with him. And he asked me, and I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And that was Joey Black, and it led to all kinds of adventures in the world of criminology on both sides. I worked with cops, I worked with killers. I've had my life threatened. I've saved lives. I had the man who was the most wanted man in America. He had been on the FBI's most wanted list for 10 years, longer than anybody in history. He showed up at my apartment one day and asked me to arrange his surrender. And we did it we surrendered him on the Today Show to the FBI.
Right.
So it was I've been so fortunate in that I've gotten to dip my toe into. I did a book with a guy named Kerry Mullis. Kerry won the Nobel Prize in biochemistry for the invention of something called PCR, the polymers chain reaction, and that has become known as the biological screwdriver. And everything that has happened with DNA since 1984 is because of Kerry. Now, the other part of Kerry is he was nuts. He was known as the surfing scientist who would trip on acid and then go out surfing. One of the big fights we had in the book is he wanted to talk about what the raccoons, who really were aliens, were telling him. And I tried to dim that as much as I could. But we reached, I wanted the book to be an exploration of one of the most fascinating minds I'd ever encountered.
Yeah.
And that was Kerry. I remember one quick story that only could have happened with Kerry. I have a beach house, and we were out at the beach house, and he said to me once, he said, before I won the Nobel Prize, and I said, stop. I said, I have to tell you, I've had this house 20 years. That's the first time those words have ever been spoken in this house. So I said, but let me ask you a question. If you could get out of winning the Nobel Prize anything you wanted, what would it be? And he said, and Jim, I swear to you, this is a true story. I said, what would it be? And he said, I would like free air travel anywhere in the world for the rest of my life. As he finished saying that, my phone rang out there, and I answered the phone, and the person said, hi, how would you like to have free air travel for the rest of your life? And it was Delta Airlines with some kind of get my credit card thing. But I said to them, hold on, and I put Kerry on the phone, with them. But it was the kind of thing that only would happen with Kerry.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. That really is. You've done a lot of, like you say, the wealth of material it's really across the board. It's very, very cool. Even this.
Yeah.
Visual glossary of everyday objects, from paper clips to passenger ships.
Enormously successful.
Yeah.
It sold a couple of million copies around the world.
What was the inspiration for this one?
Well, I was working on a book called The War Magician, which is a novel based on the true story of a British magician named Jasper Maskelyne, who used the techniques of stage magic against Rommel in the Western Desert to win the Battle of El Alamein. and I needed to know the parts of a castle because he trained at a place called Farnham Castle, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I didn't know the difference between a bastion and ramparts, and you read it in the dictionary, but it was so I came up with the idea that maybe you do a book of diagrams that tell people what things are called. For example, if you didn't know the name of the little plastic end of a shoelace, this would enable you to look up shoe, and there'd be a diagram of a composite shoe with all the parts of shoes. And that's what the book is, and it became a huge success.
That's incredible. That's,
And
do you ever have a feeling when something is going to be a success, when you know it's going to hit with the public, or do you just, throw the ball in the air and see where it lands sometimes? How does it work for you?
My philosophy, and I tell this to my wife all the time, is that when the phone rings, the answer is yes. No can always come later. And that has gotten me into a lot of different situations. Now, there are projects that I would have been surprised if they were not successful. I was working on a history of the Civil War, and in my research, I just came up with one little paragraph that in the late 1980s, they had discovered sitting in a shoebox the transcript of a trial. Abraham Lincoln had been the defense attorney. I knew nothing about this, and I found out that Lincoln had been the defense attorney in 29 murder trials. The last one, 1859, a year before he became president. So, and the fact that a transcript of Lincoln in the courtroom, I mean, it was, to me, that was mind-boggling. So I got a copy of the transcript, which was in the public domain, and I had a conversation with a publisher, and the publisher said, I'll buy that, build a book around it. And I said, but I'll bet you would pay a lot more money if I had someone who could get on TV and promote it. And he said, absolutely. And a friend of mine suggested Dan Abrams. Dan Abrams, the ABC's legal affairs correspondent.
Right, exactly.
And I approached Dan, and he was intrigued. He thought, who's this kind of crazy guy with this idea?
Yeah.
And it would have been impossible to have found a better collaborator than Dan, who, there are passive collaborators and there are active collaborators. And Dan is an active collaborator. And, when that book was, I couldn't imagine that book was not going to be a big bestseller.
Yeah.
And it was a massive bestseller and continues to be. And that has turned into a whole series. And the fourth one, which just came out last week, this is the Jack Ruby trial. This is where the whole Kennedy conspiracy industry began.
Yeah, let's see that cover of that one again.
And this is, whoops, there it is. This is the latest bestseller. This is a new national bestseller, according to USA Today. So,
congratulations on that. Give us a little teaser about that one. hot off the presses.
Well,
and how long did it take to write it?
I lived through that trial, and I didn't remember it at all.
Wow.
But I will tell you, several things. Number one, Jack Ruby died an innocent man. People don't remember that. That's number one. Number two, this was the crime. His crime was witnessed by more people than any crime in history.
Yeah.
And his defense lawyer was Melvin Belli, who at that time was the most flamboyant lawyer.
Yes.
And the trial was bizarre. It took place downtown Dallas, and the courthouse was also the jailhouse. And in the middle of the trial, 7 prisoners escaped by using a bar of soap shaped into a gun and actually took spectators in the trial hostage. I mean, in the middle of the trial. And there was an Australian journalist who was on the phone reporting the trial. And as he's reporting, he starts talking about this jailbreak that's taking place in front of him. And it got more and more bizarre. Jack Ruby had dogs who he would refer to as his children. And if
Yeah.
anybody did not talk about his children with respect, he would get extremely upset. And yesterday, I got a note from one of his nieces who loved the book. And she said, we had been afraid that it was not going to be, that it was going to be just a whitewash like everything else. And she told us a story. She said, when Kennedy was assassinated, Jack Ruby had called his mother in Chicago and said, I want to come home right now. And he was crying. And she said, don't stay there. And had she said yes, had she said, get on a plane tomorrow, history would have been different. And so there's that. And
did it give you any, was there any change in understanding or perspective or opinion on what actually happened, with the assassination itself?
well, this was the beginning of the entire assassination industry. And, I have always felt, I never believed that there was a conspiracy, only because I don't think Americans can keep a secret. And I think if anybody had any evidence that there was a conspiracy, even if they didn't reveal it themselves, they would have left it for their family in a safe somewhere, because a map, this was the map, would have been worth millions of dollars.
Sure.
So, and also, as I said, the FBI gave me access to the crime lab. So I spoke to the agents who had investigated, who had done the investigation. And, there was the firearms investigator, Cunningham. The only interview he ever did was with me. And he explained to me how he had fired the rifle and was able to get off the prescribed number of shots within the time period. There was some fascinating fingerprint evidence and all that. Conversely, which destroys my whole point, there was very little evidence against James Earl Ray for the Martin Luther King assassination. And I have always believed that that was a conspiracy, and yet no one has come forward with any evidence. So it sort of destroys my own philosophy that you can't keep a secret. So, but it's all come together. And I just want to mention, at the same time the Ruby book was published, and here I'm shameless promotion, my new novel, Executive Order. I've written books with politicians. Among them is Donald Trump. I wrote Donald Trump's campaign book. I also did a book with Robert Wexler, who was the most liberal member of Congress at the time. So I have a background of politics. And I was approached by a publisher a couple of years ago to do a sequel to the 1930s classic, It Can't Happen Here, the story of how fascism came to America. And the problem with that book is it was a political polemic and it was boring. So I wanted to write an action adventure novel with a political background. And this book takes place in the future. It's after Trump, who we reference. It's after Biden. And it's, although my politics tend to be liberal, I do listen to both sides. And I do believe so strongly that we have to figure out how to talk to each other.
Oh, yeah, we do.
And so the essential plot of the book is that in an effort to make that happen, this country elects an independent. And with that independent, Ian Reitman, the right man for the right time, begins to understand is it requires him taking drastic steps to force the country to come together. And
The
my
executive order. Yeah.
my protagonist is an unusual guy. I love books and movies that take you into a world that you don't often see.
Yeah.
And my protagonist, whose name is Raleigh Stone, the Rolling Stone, is a disabled war veteran, a special operator who lost the use of his legs and became a digital journalist. And he's in a wheelchair, which he calls Mighty Chair, which is sort of a tricked out chair. And he begins to unravel this plot, and it's what happens to him and how he uses the community to do what he does. And I am fortunate, that a close friend of mine has spent his life in a wheelchair, and he sensitized me to it. Um, as he said once, and I never ever forgot it, if you want to get a glass of water, you walk to the sink and you get a glass of water. If I want to get a glass of water, I have to think, can I reach the glass? If I
Hmm.
reach the glass, can I turn the water on? How do I turn the water off? And everything he does during a day, he has to think it through.
Yeah.
And he also says that when you're in a chair, you make people uncomfortable and they don't know how to act. So they either ignore you or sometimes they raise their voice because they think it's a hearing thing. He said, and if you're smart, you can use that to your advantage. Uh, and
Yeah.
uh, and that's what my character does. There's literally 1 million people every day who live life in a wheelchair, and hopefully, this book at least gives readers a hint of what that world is like. But I would not pretend it's literature. What it is a great beach read, and once you get in it,
Perfect season coming up for
yeah,
that.
and the amazing thing was so many of the things that I predicted have already happened or in the process of happening. Um, the book opens with a disaster caused by a hacker. I wrote this
How
2 years ago.
how familiar.
Yeah. So it's you if you read this, you'll be nodding your head, yeah, in recognition. And there's also a lot of I've been also we haven't talked about it. I've written a lot of humor, um, some of it very successfully, um, some of it less. I did a book called Chicken Poop for the Soul, which
Yes.
the
Yeah.
the cynics version of the chicken.
Soup
Uh,
for the soul.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, it's about a guy who was, for example, holding up a bank and was shot. And when they operated, they discovered an aneurysm next to his heart that was about to burst. And they actually were able to save his life and enabled him to serve every day of the 25-year sentence. So it's that kind of cynicism, all those stories. I did a book that actually did extremely well in Europe, but not much here, called Conversations with My Cat, which I loved. I don't know if you're a cat person, uh,
Sure.
but this is my cat explaining to me what life is like as a cat. Yeah. And as he said, the first thing a young cat learns is how to deal with human beings. And
Yes.
he says the basic philosophy governing all relationships between cats and human beings is you scratch my back, you scratch my back. That's
Right. That's it's a one way. I
there's
wonder
no,
if that was another phone call coming in, letting you know you have free airfare
yeah.
on Delta.
So well,
But like you say, humor, you've got to have humor. The balance in life is essential, right? Especially, when we go through things which has been unprecedented. They'll be reading about it in the history books in perpetuity, pandemics and the political craziness and the civil unrest and the economic strife all in the same year, all at the same time. And our world changing in so many ways with people working from home and some things gone and closed forever, and just a lot of change and a lot of things that have happened. What have you learned through all of that? And is there another book in the offing touching upon some of the incredible things that we've all experienced and are continuing to experience with COVID and really everything else tied to it?
Well, I've gone through life as an optimist. And, sometimes there are things that you just have to deal with. And for me personally, it didn't, because I've spent my life sitting in a room. People read about authors having all these great adventures. And yeah, I've had my few, but most of them are created by some guy or woman sitting in a room by his or herself. My wife, on the other hand, is a yoga instructor and a fitness trainer, and she ended up putting her whole business online. And it opened up a whole world to her because she now has clients across from coast to coast. And now that we're getting back here in New York into a more normal world, she's figuring out how to use both of them.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be fascinating to see what we keep from what we've learned in the last year and what we discard.
Yeah.
And, a year ago, last March, you have to remember, nobody had ever heard of Zoom.
The only Zoom that they remember, there's two, and I mentioned it on the show: Mazda, Zoom, and Zoom, the kids show on PBS.
Right.
That was it.
Exactly. And now Zoom is
what they talk about. Yeah. I'm going to Zoom. It's going to now be, it's becoming a word like Xerox did for, making copies, and Kleenex has for tissues.
Well, one of the things I talk about in this book is that we talk about one of the games that arose during this period is what I call confetti Scrabble, which are words. It's regular Scrabble, but you have to use letters to make things that sound like words that aren't words. And
do you have a couple examples?
Well, confetti, obviously.
Yeah, confetti, right?
Trump word is the greatest. But my wife is a Scrabble player. I'm not, and she'll. I will tell you.
A lot of people were having COVID teenies too, instead of martinis.
She is. My wife is friends with the great Barbara Corcoran.
Oh yeah, sure.
They play Scrabble together, and Barbara, who's
also on Shark Tank for those maybe outside the U.S. area.
Sense of humor.
She's just really.
At one point, Barbara put down a confetti word, and my wife said, "Is that a real word?"
Yeah.
And Barbara said, "I don't know." She said, "But if anybody questions me, I tell them it's a small Korean bush."
Well, now, of course, for the longest time, BC meant typically before Christ, but now it means before COVID.
Yeah.
Taking on a whole. The other thing too, during all of this, they told us we had to be 6 feet apart from one another, which makes sense for our health and well-being. But they didn't say that we're supposed to be 10 feet away from our refrigerators. They left that part out.
As I said, when something starts, I know I'm going to get phone calls.
Oh, yes.
And I have been on the phone and starting to work with one of the principals, and that we have become accustomed to seeing for the last year. And he has educated me about this thing in ways that I think we will soon know. But as he said, when he talks about 6 feet, when he talks about the virus, he talks about the huge mistake that the scientists made at the beginning, was they thought this was just like SARS or just like MERS, and this was just another variant of them. And the thing that marked them and made them the way to deal with them is you could only spread them when you were symptomatic.
Right.
If you weren't having symptoms,
That
you
was a
couldn't spread
big
them.
part. Yeah.
That's why wearing a mask, that's why all the testing was so important, because if you had symptoms, you could wear a mask, you could be isolated, and it wouldn't spread. And it was only in late January into February that they first began to suspect that this was spread by asymptomatic people, and we were doing everything wrong. And that came out of the cruise ships.
Cruise ships. Yeah.
Where
Right.
50% of the people tested positive, but only 20% showed symptoms. And so I'm learning so much about this
The whole,
disease, and the scientists are still learning.
all these variants now that are popping up, and it's morphing into other things, and
But
it's trying very vigilantly to make a return however it can. This thing is really
here's something really interesting, though, about it. Like, we're all familiar with survival of the fittest.
yes.
The problem with a virus, a very strong virus, is it kills the host, and
Yes.
it can't survive. So the
Right.
virus that survives is not the most lethal form of it, but
Right.
rather the one that makes you sick but doesn't kill you. And
And
so
I'm not too keen on anything that kills the host for reasons that don't need to be explained.
yeah, but so a pandemic like that's why a pandemic eventually disappears, and it doesn't die out, but it takes a different form.
It takes
And
another
it's
form.
fascinating to get
It
into.
really is. We'll be living with it probably for the rest of our lives, like
Absolutely.
the flu and a few other things. It's just there's different versions of it that we'll be dealing with from time to time. Eddie Fisher, what a story! Been
Still,
there, done that. Yes. What
I
was that like?
I believe that one of the great movies still to be done is Eddie Fisher, Elizabeth Taylor, Debbie Reynolds, and Richard Burton. And those stories,
That whole triangle, yeah.
laugh out loud, bizarre, funny, poignant. There's a great story is Eddie Fisher was in Rome with Elizabeth Taylor as she is making what at the time is the most expensive movie ever made. And Richard Burton, her co-star, is there. And Richard Burton starts reciting Dylan Thomas poetry. And Eddie, feeling very threatened, goes into the next room, sits down at the piano, and starts singing "Oh My Papa." So, and I'll tell you, what was interesting is that when the book was finished, Eddie loved it because he felt it accurately reflected his life.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing life. But
Yeah.
when the reviews came out and they talked about that life and the things that he did in a less than positive way,
His fans
he got very angry and stopped talking to me because the book was too accurate. And he had been living in this world like Trump for so long that he had no interest in knowing what other people thought of him.
So did you think he was hoping it would be a book that sort of sweetened the image a little? Is that what he was hoping for, maybe?
I'm sure he was hoping that. I mean, and there's amazing stories. Eddie going to the White House, the Kennedy White House, and getting vitamin C shots with Jack Kennedy, from Dr. Feelgood, as he was known at the time.
Yeah, right.
You know, Eddie and Debbie Reynolds climbing over the back wall of their house to escape the press, and they couldn't get the car started. So there was Debbie behind the wheel of the car as Eddie is pushing it downhill. The biggest stars in the world, Eddie's pushing this car downhill. You know, so
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing. The things you learn, you know, people open up to you, which is really amazing. Here's another. This is a great one too. Planet of the Umps, baseball life from behind the plate, Ken Kaiser. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Kenny was Ron Luciano's protege, and they had an enormous amount of fun. You know, and we spoke with a lot of umpires, and one of my favorite stories was an umpire at third base. A ball hit 250 feet down the left field line, and he called it foul. And the manager of the other team, the batters team, came out and started screaming and said, "Are you telling me you can see that ball hit 1 inch away from the foul line from this distance?" And the umpire looked at him and said, "Listen," he said, "on a clear day, I can see the sun, and that sucker is 180 million miles from here."
Yeah. On a clear day, you can see forever. That
And
is cool. Yeah.
you know, and Ronnie Luciano had his great,
And you mentioned that too.
his
Yes.
great. He talked about Nolan Ryan, who was known as throwing faster than anyone. He said at one point a pitch came in, and he said he didn't see it, and he said ball sounded low.
It sounded that is funny. Patient number one.
Yeah. This is a tragedy.
Yeah, I know.
This is about a guy named Rick Murdoch, who had a company making a biotech device, a stem cell separation. Basically, when you're getting a transplant, what they do is they take out all of your white blood cells, your defense system, all of them. So you have no immune system. And then they separate them from the cancer cells. They try and get out all the cancer cells. Well, his company made a stem cell separation device. And he, while they were making it, was diagnosed with stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma, which is fatal. And the night before he was getting his transplant, they got it to work for the first time. And he got his transplant 25 years ago and lived stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma and lived. But Baxter Pharmaceuticals sued his little company for invasion of copyright, claiming they had used the same antibody, which they did, but they used it in a very different way. There was a jury trial, 103 counts. The jury found Rick innocent of all 103 counts. The judge threw out the verdict, said the jury could not understand the highly technical aspect of the decision, declared the company guilty from the bench, and put him out of business. And the stem cell separation device disappeared.
Mm.
And 2 years later, I was at a party, and somebody came up to me and said, "Would you like to know the real story?" And I said, "Yes." And he told me the judge had been bribed. He told me what the judge got in return. And I never knew for sure if it happened or not. Certainly no way of proving it. But what happened, what he said the judge wanted, was exactly what happened.
Mm.
And
How long ago was this?
this was This book was done in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. So
and
Baxter went out. That company
yeah,
went on. Yeah.
no, Baxter didn't go out. CellPro, which was his
Cell Pro
company,
did. Yeah.
Baxter put them out of business.
Baxter put them out. Yeah.
And it's a, and I learned a whole, for me, the fun part is doing the research.
I
And we
can't
got,
wait to read your memoir
yeah,
when you write it about David Fisher.
well, in this book, we got into the whole fascinating history of transplants.
Yeah.
Do you know where the whole science of transplants came from?
Where'd it come from?
Hiroshima. What happened is months after after the war ended, Japanese were dying. And when they did autopsies, they discovered that they had no white blood cells. The radiation had killed their immune systems. And somebody came up with the bright idea of transplanting them to save them. And they did not, they would live, but then they would die from something called graft versus host disease.
Mm.
And in the mid 50s, twins had to have a transplant. And one of them gave an organ to his twin, and he survived. And that was the first successful transplant. And they began to understand how that people were, what was happening is you could transplant successfully, whether it be an organ or blood, but the body would reject it. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason that it accepted the twins is they had the same essential DNA. And that was the beginning of the whole organ transplant business.
That's fascinating, isn't
That's,
it? I
that's
mean,
why I
gee,
love what I do.
yeah.
The stuff you learn.
You are the replacement for the Encyclopedia Britannica series. I mean, really amazing. Here's another in the collection.
People do not know how effective the U.S. Marshal Service is. They are astonishingly good at what they do. They take more murderers off the street than every other law enforcement agency combined. They do. This is another thing I've always felt make a great movie. They've had these things, it's kind of a hell week or hell month, in which they put everything else aside and they go after killers. And at one point, several years ago, in a period of 2 weeks, they took 4,000 murderers off the street in 2 weeks. 4,000 murderers. These guys are so brave,
Yeah.
the fugitive task force, because they're going after convicted people. They're not going after people with driving tickets.
Right.
And the stories of the people, where they hide, how they find them. I'll tell you, here's an interesting thing that they use. I'm going to tell you this, and you're going to think about it and say, yeah, that's true. Every time you go on the computer, you follow essentially the same protocol. You go to 2 or 3 or 4 of the same sites, generally in the same order. At one point, the Marshal Service was chasing a mass killer, killed 4 people, and he was on the run. And they got his computer, and they found out the websites that he went to. And they went to his provider, and they said, the next time somebody gets on the computer in this order, notify us. And they did. And he was at a Staples in Ohio. He had rented a computer because that's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they caught him, because that was his footprint. And people don't know this. The Marshal Service is essentially the chief investigative agency in law enforcement, or the FBI. If the whole Whitey Bulger story,
Yeah.
the FBI could not find Whitey Bulger for 10 years, and the Marshal Service found them, or found who they believed to be Whitey Bulger. And they told the FBI, and the FBI said, no, it's not him. We've looked at him. And the Marshal Service said, that's okay. We're going to go arrest him. And the FBI, not to look bad, went and picked him up, and it was him.
Mm.
And I mean, but the FBI is no longer in the fugitive business. They're in the terrorist business. And so the Marshal Service has become our national police force. They're amazing.
That's amazing. It really, really is. Everybody's being riveted by the conversation. They're saying here, these are great stories. Incredible, interesting to hear David tell us about all of this. That's Jane watching in Sweden. Dr. Barbara Milton, riveted by the stories. She had a question if you knew the organ that was transplanted in Japan, that very first, what it was?
It was not in Japan, it was white blood cells.
It was the white blood cells.
It was a blood transfusion.
Yeah.
I think that with the twins, I think it was a liver, but I'm not sure. I'll tell you a great, looking at the doctor, I've just finished the first draft of an absolutely wonderful book that Dr. Milton may know. I don't know if she's a medical doctor or not. LCSW, don't know what that is. But there was a guy named Charlie Modica, and Charlie was 27 years old, wanted to be a doctor, couldn't get into medical school, went to medical school in Spain, realized that there were 40,000 kids applying to medical school every year, most of them qualified, for only 16,000 spots. So he decided to start his own medical school.
Mm.
So he wrote to every English-speaking country in the world. They all turned him down. Grenada got its independence. He wrote to them and they said, sure. So he started his medical school in Grenada. And the book is like the Bad News Bears go to medical school.
Yeah.
It was like this motley crew that starts this medical school. And the next thing you know, the U.S. Marines are showing up, invading Grenada to save them. The medical school has become, graduates 1,100 doctors a year now, more doctors than any medical school in America, into the American medical system. Charlie has revolutionized American medicine, fighting every step of the way against the AMA. And this medical school that literally had one building that Charlie improvised. I mean, the stories are phenomenal, sneaking the cadavers in at night. And the local newspaper wrote, the medical school's cadavers arrived last week, unfortunately dead. So
that's incredible.
You
That's
know,
amazing. These stories are just amazing. Dr. Milton said, bravo to you. She's a doctor of clinical social work.
Well, they also have a school of public health now at St. George's University in Grenada. So, you know, it's a medical school, a university, all of it. So, well, thank you, Joan.
Yeah, a lot of lights. Could listen. Joan is here and commenting, and these are our lovely viewers. Juanita says Juanita's watching in South Africa. One of our regulars. I could listen to the stories the whole night. Dr. Milton says, "Wow."
Well, Jasper Maskelyne, who was the war magician, which is the one who used the techniques of magic against Rommel in the Western Desert. He retired to Kenya and used magic to fight against Jomo Kenyatta and the Mau Mau. And at one point projected the image of Jomo Kenyatta being hanged on a cloud over Mount Kenya. So,
yeah, absolutely amazing.
And I'll tell you, that one's not me. I don't know how that got on the that book.
Some are bright and terrible. Yeah.
But I actually met in doing the research for the War Magician, and I don't know if I mentioned it's about to become a movie. Benedict Cumberbatch is going to star, and they just announced they'd hired a director. But I met a guy named Robert Harbin, and Robert Harbin is considered the greatest creator of magic tricks in modern history. The magic
Wow.
show and all this. And he was a protege of Maskelyne from South Africa.
That's what a
And
story.
he was living in London, and he was this wonderful man living in a basement flat, and it was as British an experience as you can have. His wife had been an actress, and she was wearing a butterfly costume that caught fire, and she had become crippled, and she was a little mentally damaged. And we were talking about Jasper, and she would come up and interrupt, and he would look at her and say, "Now, dear, Mr. Fisher had come to talk about Jasper." And seeing the way he treated her was so magnificent, so beautiful. And yet he was, this, in, he created a book of great magic tricks and printed 50 copies, and they sell, the last one sold for about $50,000
Wow.
in the industry. And he is a legend. But that, as I say, the great part of doing what I do, just like what you do, is it puts you in proximity with extraordinary people.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you have a curiosity,
You learn something from each of them, and they
absolutely.
learn things from you too during the course of the conversation. If you just take the time to listen and to feel it. A lot of times people, I'll hear that a lot when on my work in television and radio. And then with this show, people are like, Jim, you really listen, you really guide us along. Because sometimes, you'll have people who will be like an interviewer or host, whatever, where they make it all about them and they're doing all the talking. And I've even watched shows and listened to shows where I'm yelling at the screen saying, shh, let them finish that answer. Wait, they were just about to get to that good part, and you came in with something that had nothing to do with it, and you threw it all off. Just listen. You'll learn a lot.
One of the things that I learned, and fortunately learned early, was that to be a good interviewer, you can't have an ego, because you're not in competition with your guests.
Not at all.
And
you're supposed to actually reassure the guest, lift up the guest, celebrate the guest. Yeah.
And the other part is, the best question you can ever ask is silence. Silence makes people uncomfortable. And if you ask, and all your viewers or listeners can try this. If you ask someone a question, they will give you an answer. And if you continue to look at them and don't say a word, they will give you another answer that is much closer to the truth. Well, what I mean is, or what I meant to say, people want to fill silence. They don't like that.
Exactly right. Because we're trained as on-air people to not have any dead air to fill. But when you do pause, and when you connect, also when you find threads between yourself and the guest. Oh, I remember doing that. Oh, that's true. We had a brilliant actor on the other night from Hollywood, Rico Simonini. He's a cardiologist, but he's also a brilliant actor. He's been in all kinds of movies and television. We ended up talking for the first 8 minutes of the show about the fact that he grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and he is a longtime Mets fan. And I grew up on Long Island, so Mets fan, because fathers, both mine and his, staunch Brooklyn Dodger fans first, and then those folks went to the Mets. So the whole conversation first was about that and this connection, and then whole New York connection. And then we went into all the other fabulous things he's done in his career. It's finding a connection too. And
let me make a connection. Where in Long Island did you grow up?
Actually born in Mineola, and then out east in Suffolk County, the Smithtown area.
I grew up in New Hyde Park.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And which is one of my best friends was in Mineola. So I was there in Mineola and Hempstead and those areas.
Sure. Yeah.
My wife and I have a house on Fire Island.
Fire Island. Yeah.
Not far. But to your point about, if you listen, you find ways of making connections to people.
That's right.
And it enlivens the conversation. It's as I tried to teach my kids, if you want somebody to like you, get them talking about themselves.
Yes. Yeah, that is so true. Exactly. Yeah, turn it back so that they have the floor. Here's another one I want to throw in. What's what in sports? That's a cool one.
That was the What's What book was so successful that they wanted a sequel. And this was the sequel. It was all the parts of everything from the home plate to the movements in Olympics, how people were judged with stop action photographs,
Yes.
what they had to accomplish to get certain points. And there's a lot of history in this one, more than in the What's What book.
Dr. Milton asks, you're a national treasure. She says, how do you choose your subject matter for your books? And I know you said at the top that, you'll go digging and researching things that interest you, but sometimes the subject matter comes to you as well.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons, and to say there isn't an economic factor wouldn't be true. You know, I can be bought, but most of my projects I get involved with because I'm fascinated, because I want to know more about the subject, because I love doing research. I love finding things that nobody has found before. I'm not even sure I mentioned this. Did I mention the Henry Wade connection in the in this book?
Yeah, a little bit, but not really to the degree that, yeah.
Henry Wade was the prosecutor
Yeah.
who prosecuted Jack Ruby.
Right.
And nobody ever heard of him. And you think, you remember Jack Ruby, you remember Lee Harvey Oswald, you remember all of them. Henry Wade was, you think, lost to history.
Yeah.
And just at the last minute, when the book was about to be done, I found this thing that Henry Wade was the defendant in Roe v. Wade. And him, more than anybody,
Talk about something to find. Wow.
is the name. I mean, no, yeah. Did you ever wonder who Wade was? We
Yes.
heard Jane Roe.
And it's being talked about even now, recently. Yeah.
And Henry Wade, who prosecuted Jack Ruby, was the defendant in Roe v. Wade. So, so those are that's the kind of historical trivia that I just love.
No connection to Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah.
You mentioned we talked about the connection with Dan Abrams, of course, from ABC News and collaborating with him. Here is, I think this is another in that series that you were talking about. This one with Theodore Roosevelt for the defense. Tell us about this one.
Great First Amendment case. Theodore Roosevelt wrote a column accusing the leader of the Republican Party of being corrupt. And the leader of the Republican Party sued him. But what was really going on is Roosevelt, having lost the 1912 election, wanted to run for president again and was sort of forgotten, while the person on the other side was going to run for governor of New York and then hope to run for president after. So this was an attempt by Roosevelt to get his name back on the front page, to revive his career. It was, at that time, it was a massively important trial. It was on the front page of every newspaper in America. Teddy Roosevelt testifying. And he was on the stand for 8 days and testified, and he was And at one point, the judge said, "Why don't we just sit back and listen to Mr. Roosevelt?" I mean, he didn't answer the questions. He said whatever he wanted to say. It's a wonderful story. The next book in the series was John Adams Under Fire, and it was
Yes.
John Adams defending the troops in the Boston Massacre, the British troops. One of the things we try to do in the series is tell the history of the American legal system. And we've done it now through it's not just about the trial, it's about the world surrounding the trial.
Right.
I will tell you the next book that we are at work on. I think your question before was, do you know a book is going to be a bestseller? I think it's quite possible the next book may be the biggest book of my career. I can tell you.
Wow.
I got.
We when somebody says something like that, David, we actually have a graphic for that, and let's see if we can pull that up. Might be the biggest book of his career, so we would call that a world premiere exclusive on the Jim Master Show Live.
I will tell
you always have to have a graphic for whatever happens.
Well, I love that one. But I will tell you that last week I got to ask a question that I never, ever thought I would be privileged to ask. And that was, what was young Martin Luther King like?
What a question. Wow.
This was someone, I don't want to, I can't give, I'm not allowed to give too much away, but I can tell you this is, and I was startled that I did not know this person. Startled. This was one of the most important people in the civil rights movement that we have never heard of. And this is the trial that you and I did not know happened, that he says was the trial that started the entire civil rights movement. And he was there.
He was there. That's amazing.
91 years old, still practicing law.
Still at it. Wow. That is amazing. That really, I mean, when you think about the scope and the breadth of people that you've had an opportunity to chat with, and even with some levity, like you said, chicken poop for the soul. This one, I don't know. This one is actually on your website, believe it or not. Somebody must have put it on there. Yeah. The webmaster guy.
There's a couple. And if I were good enough,
they gave you some extras.
If I were good enough with technology, I would figure out how to tell them to take it off.
How to tell them to take it off. Probably a good read, but
for a while they had me dying about 12 years ago on Amazon. And somebody
the late oh my god, somebody
was so pleased to meet me.
I'm glad that you're with us tonight. How you feeling? Yeah. You look good. Juanita in South Africa asks, David, what was your, I mean, this is they're like your children, they're like your babies. Every author I've ever talked to, and I've done some authoring myself too, but they all become like your children. You care for the books, you care for the people involved, the characters, everything. Is there a favorite so far? Is there one book that if God came and said, you can pick one food, one person, and one book that you've written, I'm going to send you to this island, and that's where you're going to be with that person, that food, and that book, the rest of David Fisher's life. Of the books you've written, what would that be? Tough question.
Writing, I think this will surprise you a little, but writing the cat book brought me a lot of joy. I love animals. And cats, I love relationships with animals. I was fortunate to do a book once with a veterinarian named John Paul, Dr. Paul, who has the most successful show on Animal Planet.
Yes.
Dr. Paul's Amazing Animals, and but the cat book, I promise you, it's laugh out loud.
Yeah.
And they've tried to develop it as a movie several times. It hasn't gotten traction yet. Um, it's funny. It was a bestseller, and it was #1 in France and #1 in Israel, and but it just never got any traction here
In the United States. I wonder why. Do you ever try to figure those things out, or you just move on to the next thing?
Yeah, you know, the real problem, as you know,
Yeah.
is by the time something comes out, your mind is so deeply involved in whatever you're doing. You know, one of the things that when I talk to young writers, I always tell them is know when to quit. That, you know, there are people that write a book and beat their head against the wall, against the computer, writing it and rewriting it and rewriting the rewrite. And the truth is, it's never ever going to be as good as you want it to be. And no matter how many times you rewrite it, your audience is not going to notice those nuances. And the best thing you can do is let a book have its own life.
That's a question I usually ask a lot of writers, fellow writers, journalists, fellow journalists, authors. Do you find it harder to get going and put the first few lines on the page, or knowing when to put the period on the last sentence and cap it and walk away from it?
A wonderful professor, English professor I had named David Owen, once said that after you've read the first sentence of a book, you should be able to predict the last sentence. And that's obviously not true. But his point is that a book has to have a through theme. And you have to be true to that first sentence. And I've always believed that by far the first sentence is the most important sentence of anything you write, because your reader decides after that first sentence whether they're going to stay with you or not.
Yeah.
And so there is an art to writing the first sentence. I know it may take me a day, 2 days, 3 days to write that first sentence or the first page. And once I get into it, I will be able to, it will start picking up momentum, and it'll go much quicker because I will know my character. I'll know who the person, I'll hear the voice in my head if it's nonfiction. And I'll be able to proceed from there.
How do you know when to wrap it where you're not trying, like that great advice that you said for other writers who are up and coming or becoming writers for the first time, knowing when to, it's almost like editing a movie or piece of music or film. I mean, we know that in this world of television and radio and film and everything, you can edit the heck out of something to where the essence and the vision and the feeling you initially wanted has been so stripped that it's a shell of itself. So in this realm for you, how do you know when to say, I'm good? You know, you might tweak it a little, but I'm good with it. Let's get it out there now.
It's hard. And, you know, sometimes I have to lie to myself. And I say, this might not be good enough now, but I know I'm going to get another shot at it, and a third shot. After the copy editing, after, you know, you do get several shots at a manuscript. So you let it go, even if you're not 100% satisfied with it, trying to convince yourself that you'll change it. It'll get better. It'll, you know, I will tell you, for me, the hardest part of the entire process is editing the second or third time through, because it is never going to be, because you never read a book as a whole. You read it when you're editing. You read it sentence by sentence, and every sentence is awful. And you want to change every word, every sentence. You hold your nose,
Yeah.
and you just have to keep going. After a while, you just said, "Look, this is the best I can do," and and then 6 months later, when you look at it again and you pick it up and you think, this isn't bad. This isn't awful. You know what I used to do? This is true. When I had a book come out, I would go to a bookstore early in my career and I would look around and I would say, it would be impossible for my book to be the worst book in this store.
I like that. It's a
And,
good way to, yeah, psych yourself a little bit. Yeah.
There are certain writers. Norman Mailer had the ability to believe every word he wrote was the only correct word, and because he wrote it, it was right. And I envy people like that, but I've never been that way. My job has always been entertaining people and hopefully educating them a bit.
You seem to have mastered the balance of both. Juanita had asked, when writing fiction, do you plot the whole story first or start writing and then see where it goes?
One of the things that I've discovered is my subconscious knows where I'm going, even if my conscious mind does not.
It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
It's stunning where you will reach a point where you'll need an ending, an event or something, and your mind will suddenly make it happen. But more than that, you'll find that everything you've done before had set that point up. It is the most astonishing thing, and it has happened now often enough that I can not worry about the ending, because I know it's going to be there when I need it. I know my mind is working on it.
Speaking of that, do you have times of the day when you are most inspired? I say that because a friend of mine, longtime screenplay writer, and he would always find his inspiration when the house was quiet, when it was like 2 a.m. and everybody's sleeping and the phone isn't ringing and there's no emails and no, texting or internet or anything going on, TV, radio not on, nobody knocking at the door. And sometimes he would even wake out of a sound sleep with inspiration from either something that he was dreaming or just this fresh approach of having quiet time to really focus. And he would go right to the typewriter, put paper in, and just start going at it. Is there a time of the day and sort of a scene and scenario for you when you are the most inspired, when you really start to pour it out?
I'll tell you when I really get inspired. At the end of the month when the bills come in. And I think, I got to get...
And as he said earlier, he can be bought.
Yeah. That's reality. If you're going to survive.
Might cost a little more than when he first started out, but they can come up with a number. And when the bills, they don't stop. Yeah.
I have a very strong work ethic, and I can focus. I can sit in a room with other people, and I can really tune it all out.
Yeah.
And I think that just comes from experience and
and
multitask
as well.
I'm sorry?
You can multitask as well when there's a lot.
One thing I do
Yeah.
is when I was working on a typewriter, I would get 3 pages done, and they would have to be clean. They couldn't have crossouts or anything. So I'd retype and retype and retype and retype and retype. Working with a computer, I have to get at least 1,000 words a day written. And I try for more in the right situation, but I will work as long as it takes to get 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And, and I will work 7 days a week when necessary.
When you're rolling and inspired and there's a lot pouring out, you want to get it all captured?
Jim, seriously, I'm not someone who believes in inspiration, because, on those days you're inspired, you're going to write at the top of your abilities. And on those days you're depressed, you're going to write at the bottom.
It's true.
And if that's reflected in what you write, it's going to be like this, up and down.
Up
And what
and
you
down.
want to do is you want to be in the middle. You don't want to be, you don't want the language.
Highs and lows and
Yeah. And so I don't believe there's any such thing as writer's block. I think writer's block is,
you hear that a lot, right? You
yeah,
hear,
I don't believe
do
that.
you ever walk away sometimes to refresh, reboot, and not do it and then come back with a fresh perspective?
I can't work for more than 15 or 20 minutes at a time. I dive in.
Yeah.
I work until I get to a certain place, and then I stop and I walk away. And
It's very healthy to do that. Yeah.
people, before I was married, and we live in a house now, but I lived in an apartment. The only thing I ever kept in my refrigerator were manuscripts, because in case of a fire, it was where they were safest before it was easy to get things copied and as easy as it is today.
Oh, I thought it's because you were going to write a chiller.
Well, because if you kept food in the refrigerator and you got up every 15 minutes, the first place you go is to the refrigerator. So I had a rule that if I wanted something to eat or if I wanted coffee or whatever, I had to go out of the house.
Out of the house.
And
It's a good
after I got
idea.
married, and I've had to change that to some degree, but I've still kept up a lot of it. You make your own. Every writer makes his or her own rules. I can't say that mine would work for anybody else, but they work for me.
They work for you. Well, they have worked for you and continue to. And the proof is in the pudding and in the writing. When you look at all of this work, and we've just really scratched the surface of the body of work, this is the latest of the latest, which is very, very exciting. It's of great blessing and joy that you're able to do what you love and that you love what you do and have all these opportunities to write and to connect. And you are, through all of these stories and everything you're penning, you're really living life to the fullest in ways that probably in school you could never have imagined, right?
Well, I always wanted to be a journalist, as I said, because I knew it would put me in different experiences. As I was saying to you before we started, how fortunate you and I have been to be able to pursue something we love in life. And there's always highs and there's lows. I had a point there was one point in my life when I had a manuscript rejected. It later turned out to be very successful, but it was rejected at the point, and I felt like a complete failure, and I didn't want to see anybody. And unfortunately, it was my birthday, and somebody had planned a big surprise party for me. And suddenly I walked into a room not wanting to see anybody, and there was everybody, um, and feeling like a complete failure. And I actually had a case of hysterical laryngitis. I lost my voice.
Hmm.
And, it's important to remember, it's fun sitting here talking about the success, this and that, but there's failure too.
But what it takes to get there, the blood, sweat, and tears, the
And
rejection, the toil.
I'm interrupting you because you've been there,
Sure, absolutely.
and in your career, but you've gotten to do what you love. You've gotten to do what you wanted to do when you were a kid,
Yeah.
and how many, that's the gift that you and I were given.
And to express it and share it with others and share it with the world as well. We're not necessarily just in a room, in four walls. We get to share that with others, which is really the icing on the cake, isn't it, David?
Oh, it, as you know, there's, I look at these words that people are posting, and I don't get that, I don't get a lot of feedback. I tend not to go on Amazon, um, because, I remember when the what's book came out, the reviews were extraordinarily good. People loved it, except the New York Times. And the reason they didn't love it is because we had a composite windmill in there, all the parts of every windmill. And they assigned the review to someone whose passion was windmills. And he objected to the fact we had created a composite windmill. And so he didn't like the book. But because he didn't like the book, it made me so upset and furious that I stopped reading reviews.
Yeah.
So I just don't bother.
Reviews have never stopped me from going to a movie, a play, a restaurant. Obviously, if there's 10 million people in the public saying they got sick at a restaurant or a hotel or something, well, then you might want to investigate a little bit more and look at other places where there's reviews. But just if somebody says, "Oh, I went to the play and it was," well, that's you. Good for you. But I'm going to still go and check it out. And if I think it's, then I'll know. You live and learn. It's
Jim, I am so grateful for your time.
Oh, this was an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Merlin had one quick question, and she's watching in Ontario, Canada. She actually had two quickies. She said, do you write a few books at the same time? And how do you manage to get work done with young children around?
Thank goodness for school.
Yeah.
And my children aren't young anymore.
Yeah.
But, they were gone a good portion of the day. And, you figure it out. It's easier being a father than a mother. That's for sure. The responsibilities are different. And yes, I don't necessarily write more than one book at a time, but I work on more than one book at a time. I'll be researching one project while writing something else. At times, I have written more than one book at a time, but generally, I was once sitting around a table with Martin Cruz Smith, who was working on Gorky Park, while I was working on The War Magician, and somebody else was working on a book about an oceanographer. And I realized I was living in 1940 Egypt, where my book took place, because I got copies of the Egyptian Daily Mail and I was reading them every day. Well, Martin Smith was living in Russia in his mind. Well, and the third person was in the ocean. And we were having this perfectly wonderful conversation, but we were spending our lives in different places completely.
Yeah.
And that's what it requires, I think, you to go really in depth to understand and find those things that appeal to you that you hope appeal to other people.
One of the things that I realized about myself in recent years is somebody else pointed out to me too, actually a friend, close friend. She had said, she works in marketing and PR and promotion, that the question I tend to ask first, not just, during conversation, I don't even call these interviews, I call these conversations. Interview is question, answer, talk about the book and out in like 12 minutes. These are more conversations, but in my professional and personal life, I tend to ask why first. And I realized why I asked why. And I think it's because I need and or want to feel it. So when I ask the why, I feel it. And then when I feel it, then I say, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and find out the what, the when, the how, the nuts and bolts, the nuggets that put it all together. But I always tend to start with the why first, because I'm looking at sort of the humanistic side of things, and trying to, and also connecting myself to what they've experienced, what they're saying, what they're expressing and sharing. And you'll get that with the why, and you feel the why, and then the other can take place like pieces of a puzzle. Does that make sense to you, the why?
Well, completely. And what I was thinking about, and to go a little more into the book I'm working on now, I was able to ask this person last week. He's an attorney, obviously. And I said to him, what I don't understand is because the law had been used against African Americans in this country for 150 years. Why did you think you could use the law to gain your rights? Because I realize that's what this book has to be about. That's what this book has to be about. And this faith in the system that had been so extraordinarily abusive to them, to me, was fascinating. And I couldn't understand why they had it. And I kept coming back to that to try and get, and I never really, and I got a lot of answers, and maybe putting them all together, I'll be able to figure it out. But but that book is going to answer the question why, and then it's going to show how and what and all of the other things. But that's the question that's going to answer, why did you believe that? So,
I tend to do that whenever I'm watching television or listening to the radio or anything, reading the paper, and I do still read the paper. I like the tactile feeling of a nice Sunday paper, as much as I'm online as well. But I think what's really interesting is I'll also say why a lot when I see what people say and do to one another. Why? Why did they do that? Why did they say that? Why did they actually? I'm trying to figure out what provoked, possessed, caused, as I watch even daily newscasts and you hear some of the things that go on in life. I'll always say, I don't even need to know the facts as much as I need to know the why first, and then the facts of it later. But it's the why.
all the other questions are answered by facts.
Yeah.
Why is answered by opinion and belief.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to learning why Johnny Cochran became an attorney.
Yes.
Why Kerry Mullis wanted to be a biochemist. Why Terry Bradshaw did what he did when he did it. You know, and that's when you get people talking, and that's the question that answers. That's the question where the answers become the most interesting. So, Jim, thank you for your time.
Have you, ever asked your own why? Do you have your own why, David? I think we all have one, don't we?
I guess. I mean, I don't. I've never been able to answer that question. I just. I think more than anything, doing what I do has allowed me to entertain myself.
It really has. Yeah. And it's great work. And you keep up the amazing work, my friend. This is extraordinary. Good luck with everything. And I hope at some point, we'll meet on the island or in the city, maybe for a pastrami sandwich or something.
If you're going to be here, I would love it. Dinner's on me.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Promise you that.
I appreciate that. Sherry Larson says, thanks for spending your time with us. Now I need to go see what we have in our library. Very interesting evening.
Sherry,
Merlin.
here, Sherry.
There it is. Yeah, that one. And show again the Kennedy one, too, because that one, we don't have a picture of that one yet.
All right. Whoop. There we go.
And that's out and available now?
They both are. They both were published last week.
That is fantastic. Congratulations, David. Absolutely incredible. Dr. Milton says, wonderful show. I've learned so much tonight. Juanita and Dr. Milton is in New Jersey. Juanita is in South Africa. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, David, for spending time with us and sharing your truly amazing stories. Mary in Florida. Such a great conversation tonight, David and Jim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, for staying with us.
Oh, absolutely. And the website that people can go to check out is www.dfisher.com. All the materials.
Not so up to date, but if they go on Amazon, they'll be able to.
Everything is on Amazon. Look under David Fisher.
Except that one book which I didn't write. So
yeah, drop the E. Don't look for the E, folks. He's still alive, and the E does not apply. George and I wish you the best, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff, and we'll see you in New York.
I hope the show met whatever expectations you had, and you enjoyed the time with me as much as.
And if you want to have me back, I would be delighted at some point.
I will. This was a real pleasure. You take care and you be well. And as I say to all the guests, now go stretch those legs.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, viewers.
Good night, David. David Fisher, New York Times best-selling author, multiple times, 24 times, a New York Times, NYT best-selling author. And again, what a great conversation tonight, huh? We went through just a little selection of just some of the books. You know, if we talked about all of them, we would be on a lot longer. But this is one of the latest. The Executive Order, fascinating. That's out now. And then Kennedy's Avenger, that's the one he's talking about. That's brand new, hot off the presses, as is this. These are some of the other ones. That's the one on Johnny Cochran. And just, I mean, what's interesting too is the areas of life he's delved in. Comedy, sports, politics, you know, autobiographies, William Shatner, Leslie Nielsen, Leonard Nimoy, really amazing. And then, of course, you know, crime, and you got Eddie Fisher and Terry Bradshaw, Ed McMahon, and of course, there he is. That's just one of the books that David Fisher penned. George Burns, All My Best Friends. Of course, there is that wonderful book about Gracie too, and their wonderful relationship. War Magician, he talked about that one. He talked about this one, Lincoln's Last Trial. Of all the books, amazing, he said, Conversations with My Cat, his favorite. If he was on an island with his wife and whatever that food of choice is, and God put him on the island and he can only take one book, Conversations with My Cat would be the book, he said. And also Chicken Poop for the Soul, another one. Great sense of humor, great conversation. If you missed any of this, oh boy, just watch it again, because we have all of the episodes of our Entertainment Lifestyle Talk Show series available for you 24/7, 365 on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go do it. Why? It really helps our show. We're building the channel big time, so we want to continue to have the channel grow. We want more and more people to experience the Jim Masters Show live. That way we can continue to present amazing shows, right? Each episode is something different, something unique. When you tune into our show, it isn't the same old, same old. Last night, we had the brilliant actress and singer Eileen Graff on, who starred in the 1980 sitcom Mr. Belvedere. If you didn't see that one, check it out. Tomorrow night, we have the extraordinary, amazing singer and entertainer Rosalind Kind on. Of course, she's the sister of Barbara Streisand. She's with us live tomorrow here on the Jim Masters Show Live, and that's going to be amazing. There she is, Rosalind Kind. You can see the resemblance too. She's going to be with us. Again, last night, Eileen Graff amazing Grammy-nominated singer and actress who was in so many shows and productions and still is, and was the mom on Mr. Belvedere with Bob Uecker in the 1980s. She was on last night. Ruta Lee's been on the show. John Davidson was on the show. Coming up next week, Marion Ross, who starred as Mrs. Cunningham on Happy Days, is going to be with us. And also Judy Norton, who is on the Waltons, is going to be with us too. Judy's going to be with us on Monday. Marion Ross and her son, Jim, who is an incredible impressionist, actor, voiceover artist on countless video games and movies and so much more. They're going to be on together. Marion Ross and her son will be here together on Tuesday. Coming up again tomorrow, Rosalind Kine's going to be with us, which is extraordinary. And then comedian and comedy writer and actor Jeffrey Mark is going to be with us coming up on Thursday. That's going to be amazing. The incomparable Aussie crooner and entertainer and singer, Marty Thompson. You've seen him pop in as one of our lovely viewers. He's also a legendary singer himself, an entertainer. He's going to be with us on Friday. And on Saturday, the great-grandnephew of legendary French actor Maurice Chevalier. This is Alexis Chevalier. He's a brilliant actor himself. He's going to be with us on Saturday at a special time. We're going to do that at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, because for him in France, which is where he's going to be on Saturday, where he lives, and he's lived in New York as well, but he lives in France, it'll be 8 o'clock at night in France. So we're going to do it at 2 p.m. Eastern this Saturday. We'll have the one show on Saturday. It'll be on YouTube at Jim Masters TV, the Jim Masters Show Live. Alexis Chevalier, brilliant actor, again, great-grand-nephew of legendary French actor Maurice Chevalier, is going to be with us on Saturday. And that is, again, just the short list of extraordinary guests we have on this unique place. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of online stuff and so many things to choose from. And sometimes it's almost like a blur, I'm sure. But we've got something unique we've been doing for quite some time now with over 400 plus shows day in and day out. And it's truly amazing. We love all of you. Thanks for being with us, gang. Tonight, we go cash and we just have some Dasani water in a bottle. We didn't go fancy tonight. We just decided to chill. I was on the air all day today on the radio, and then we had some television projects. When you do that amount of talking, just some fresh water tastes good. Kathleen, I see you're commenting there. Have a great night, Jim. I hope you are feeling better. Juanita says this was most amazing. Thanks, Jim. Good night, everyone. We have a public holiday tomorrow, so no getting up early. Yay. That's what's going to happen. 4th of July weekend, we're going to be going away for the weekend. We have not been away in over a year plus, if not more, because of my schedule and because of COVID and all. So we're going to be enjoying a beautiful 4th of July weekend. We're going to be going up to New Hampshire, USA, central northern New England. Very beautiful. And I may take you guys on the road with us too. We may do some cool on location stuff as well. We're going to be going up with the family and friends. Thank you, Jim, for another awesome evening. Love and good night to all in Wozniak and Jacksonville, Florida. And thank you very much, Anne, and lovely hugs and kisses right back at you, Kathleen, in New York City. Hope you're feeling better. Merlin says, all I can say is wow. Thank you for that, Merlin. I really appreciate that. Again, we do something. This is what I love to do in my professional work. I wear many hats. I do a ton of different things, and I love to have an opportunity to engage with a variety of different people. And you always learn something new every single day. Just think of all the guests we've had from all different backgrounds, music and Broadway and Hollywood and film and television and food and comedy and sports and inspiration, and guests from all around the world too. And all of you, our viewers watching live, commenting live, and those of you who are watching later. If you're watching this later, drop a like on our YouTube channel. We would love that, where this video is. YouTube loves when you do that too. So if you can, you're there on our YouTube channel now, click thumbs up and like on this episode. We would love that. And drop a comment too. Mary Bishop's been doing that a lot. Christine Clifton, Juanita's been doing it. Amy's done it. Several of you have been doing it. Juanita's done it, posting on our actual YouTube channel. We would love that. And a lot of you ask, gee, what can we do to help? Tell everybody about our show. Tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, your colleagues about the Jim Master Show Live. The more people watch, fabulous. We love it. And Barbara says, you deserve a vacation. We're going to be taking a couple. We're also going to go to Florida this summer too, and that's going to be cool. Can't wait. Lovely road trip. Good to see you, Barbara. I say Barbara, she's a personal friend, but Dr. Milton, if you didn't see this inspiring, moving episode with Dr. Barbara Milton Jr. and how she opened up about her own life and her own health and the amazing book that she wrote, check out that episode. She's an amazing author as well and a sweetheart of a person, dear friend. She was a guest on the Jim Masters Show Live a few weeks back. She got a lot of feedback, and I loved having her on the show. Good to see you, Barbara. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. And remember when we had Malou, the wonderful singer from Brussels, Belgium, on over the weekend? She got such feedback from all around the world about her appearance on the Jim Master Show Live. So many people loved it, and they're watching the episode. Remember when Bob Ader was on the show? Same thing. He's getting tremendous feedback. Remember when we had the British group Madison Skies on? Amazing feedback. If you didn't see the episode with the wonderful Irish band Strings and Things, yeah, we did that too, and that was a lot of fun. They're getting all kinds of great feedback. Rico Simonini, the brilliant actor and film director and screenwriter and cardiologist who is on our show from Hollywood, California. He's getting all kinds of incredible feedback from his colleagues and his friends. And Ruta Lee, same thing. She absolutely loved being on the show, Hollywood legend Ruta Lee. And so many people are watching the episode. John Davidson, legendary television host, game show host, and singer and actor. And he's got that cool place up in New Hampshire, Club Sandwich. Same thing, getting all kinds of feedback, which has been really cool and a blessing to hear from the guests themselves. I'm glad you're doing better, Kathleen. That is perfect. That is perfect. And what a wonderful friend. Barbara is always good for anyone in this sacred space. I agree. Amazing guests. And again, if you missed any of the episodes, they are all available for you on our YouTube channel, which is what you're watching right now. I know sometimes when we say on the YouTube channel, it sounds like we're talking in third person, but it's all there for you 24/7, 365. Share the links too on your social media. Share the links to our episodes with friends and family who you think would enjoy our series, the Jim Masters Show Live. We appreciate all of you. Thanks for all the live comments. Thanks for the comments that you do later on our YouTube channel, which we love. There it is again. Love it if you could subscribe to it. That would be awesome. And again, we will be back tomorrow night live with another amazing guest, the one and only Rosalind Kind is going to be with us, and that is going to be extraordinary. Don't forget, again, gang, no matter how rough life gets or whatever the day is like, don't forget to smile. We say that regardless of what the topic is, what the guest is. You know, life is short, life is precious, as we know, and anything can happen, and tomorrow is not guaranteed. So you're living today. So share the levity, find your Zen place. Mine, of course, is with family and friends first, and then, of course, music and writing and cycling and tennis, the ocean, swimming, surfing, boogie boarding, sailing it, walking it. I love the ocean. That is the Atlantic Ocean in New York. That's the South Shore of Long Island, New York, where that photo was taken. My work in television and film and stage, as well as radio, on air, online, multimedia. As David said, you're blessed to do work that you love and love what you do and share it with the world. And I've had that opportunity over the years as well. And blessed to know all of you. We've got quite a bit of wonderful characters here who we call our lovities and our troupities. Merlin is saying to Dr. Milton, to Barbara, stay tuned. You're always welcome here at Levity Hall. Absolutely. As a guest and a viewer. See you Friday, Jim. Tomorrow and Thursday. Yeah, the New York Mets, right? And you're so good at watching our archives as well, our archives for the Jim Masters Show live. All right, gang, we're going to scoot off. Another great episode. Cool night. We'll see you on the next one. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. You too. Go stretch those legs. Thanks for being with us, gang. You're all the best. We love you. Another fascinating episode. We thank David Fisher, New York Times bestselling author David Fisher, for joining us. His website, again, is dfisher.com. We'll see you again on the Jim Masters Show live. Always a pleasure. And Kathleen says, and thanks to all the Lovities for the get well wishes. Appreciate it. Absolutely, my friend. And we will be together real soon. I can't wait. I can't wait. All right. Love you all. Take care and be well. All right. We'll see you again on the next one on the Jim Masters Show live. Take care.